One thing that I'd wondered about when I was younger is, are humans really empathetic? Do we really have the ability for empathy? Because I knew I had felt empathy for other things, right? I had felt empathy for a dog, I'd felt empathy for my parents, I'd felt empathy for my friends, but I wasn't so sure that they were feeling empathy for me. So in this episode, we're going to retouch upon the idea of empathy. If you've been through the management part of the course, you know we've already spoken a little bit about empathy. But in this episode, let's get into the science. Let's figure out, are people really empathetic? Right? So let's get started. So, are people really empathetic? We know that humans are social animals, and empathy promotes pro-social behavior. Right? When humans branched off from Neanderthals, which are closest evolutionary cousins, we did that because we were able to create groups and they weren't. They were individuals, they were solo warriors, but we were groups, right? And as you guys know, groups always outdo a single person, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with other people. Right? So, empathy declines during medical training. One interesting thing or a story that doctors will often tell you, especially about their medical interns, is that when a medical intern sees a lot of blood, in the beginning, they usually faint or they get surprised or they get scared. But after they do it for a while, after the 100th or 200th or 5,000th time, they get desensitized to it. They don't care about their patients as much. When I was in the hospital and I was having an IV infusion some time ago, the nurse there, I looked at the nurse there and there was a patient next to me who was, I think he was having his last moments. And I asked him, doesn't that shock you? Doesn't that scare you? Don't you feel empathetic? Because he was just walking like it's normal. And he said, look, I've seen so many of these, right? I've seen hundreds of people die. And after that happens, you lose the ability to continue being empathetic, right? And it exhausts you, right? So empathy is highest between people who look and act like you. So you're most empathetic towards family. And that's exactly what the nurse told me. He said that, look, if it was my family, I'd cry, I'd shed tears, and it would really hurt me. But now, after seeing thousands of people die or hundreds of people die, I don't care so much about that, right? So we are empathetic if it's something that's novel, that's new, that's happening to somebody out there that we've never seen before, the first time you see a death. But after it happens for a while, you get desensitized. But if it's family or people who look and act and behave like you, you feel more empathetic. You feel for them, right? So it's highest between people who look and act like you. It's hardwired in your brain, right? And this is a paper on empathy, and I'm going to link you guys to it. It's a slightly controversial paper. Racism in the past has been an extension of this, right? If you don't understand this fact, you will never be empathetic, because it is possible for you to show another type of empathy, and we'll come to that. We are hardwired to be tribe creatures, right? And we need to understand this if we have any chance of building a better world. It's the reason that people bond over language, people bond over how they look. People need a reason to bond with other people, right? It's the main reason you feel a bond with cousins who look like you. Most people will tell you that, hey, if a cousin looks like me, I will be more likely to bond with them rather than a cousin who doesn't look that much like me. It's in your genome, right? So the capacity for empathy declines when you find yourself under tremendous stress or are burnt out. So like these nurses and medical interns who are always burnt out, they're always on the job, they don't get much sleep, their capacity for empathy goes down. So if you fix yourself, right, or these nurses got the right sleep, they got, their exhaustion went away, they got a little more time, they fixed themselves, only then can they help or be empathetic towards others. If a manager is burnt out, there is no way that manager can be empathetic to the needs of another person, right? So fix yourself, check yourself before you check others. So 16 female volunteers had brain scans performed while they were receiving painful electric shocks to their hands. While they received the shock, a well-defined pain matrix was activated in their brains. Afterward, they received a signal that their spouses were receiving similar shocks. This activated a similar, but not the entire pain matrix in the female's brains. So this is the first neuroimaging study, and it's going to be linked, to demonstrate that we actually do feel the pain of others, but only in an attenuated form. Attenuation, and that means in not the entirety, but a smaller version of it, makes it possible to empathize but not become overwhelmed with another person's distress. If you're a warrior and your comrade fell in battle and you were looking at that person and that person was in extreme pain, then we don't want to be crippled by that pain, right? If you feel exactly the same pain that person feels, you would also become disabled and you would become useless in the war, and becomes contagious and everybody becomes disabled. So we don't feel empathy in its full form. We're able to feel an attenuated or just a fraction of the pain that another person feels, and it's usually mental rather than physical. And we've been speaking about survival of the fittest, but I think the theme of humanity has not been survival of the fittest, but of the fittest group, right? It's always been a group-based thing for human beings. Tribe behavior is oriented toward people who look and act like you. Because of this bias, we need to utilize another type of empathy called cognitive empathy to avoid things like discrimination. So because we know that the human genome has coding for it to identify people like themselves, like yourself, we use something called cognitive empathy, which is, I understand I have that bias, so I'm going to find another way to form a connection between me and this person who does not look like me, right? And at Avalon, for example, even though there are so many people who don't look like each other, who are of different genders and all of that, we still have a common bond, even though we don't look anything like each other, because we have some common beliefs that all of us are in line with. So we use cognitive empathy on a daily basis and it works. So it's important to understand that the world is complex and situations are ambiguous. Complexity, by adding one more thing, is not, if you have n things and you add one more thing to it, it's not n plus 1. That's not how complexity works. Instead, it's n plus 1 factorial. And for those of you who don't know what n plus 1 factorial is, or you don't know what factorial is, Google is your friend. But the truth is, it becomes so much more complex, right? Even adding one more thing because of its interactions with the other thing. So suppose you have a small, city with 5 people in it, and person 1 and person 2 have some interaction with each other, and then there's person 3 who you put in. Now that person can not just interact with person 2, but can also interact with person 1, and then can interact with person 1 and 2 at the same time. There are so many things that person 3 now adds to the equation. And now imagine you add a billion people. Right? So it's a very, very complex scenario. People are in general complex. If you add things to that, it's even more complex. And a lot of people simplify the world, right? Most psychologists teach empathy by using the question, how would I feel in this situation? So if you see somebody else going through something, you can ask a question, how would I feel if I were in that situation? Right? But it's near impossible to feel what another person feels if you do not have full insight into their daily lives and don't understand their level of complexity, right? So I see this a lot with celebrities. When you and I, we're not really celebrities, right? Or maybe you are, I don't know. But if you're sitting here and we're looking at somebody else and some celebrity's life, and we read something in the media that this person is like this or this person did this, and we say, oh yeah, that person is bad or that person is good. But do we really know what that person is like? Do we know who the people that person interacts with? We don't understand anything, which is why if a news article comes out that this person is bad or this person has done this, we just jump to a conclusion without being empathetic. And the reason we're not empathetic is simply because we do not have full insight into their daily lives. If you became somebody who was sitting right next to that person, who understood all the friends of that person, who understood everything that person's been through, you learn to become empathetic towards that person's situation. The more you know about a person's life, the more empathetic you are towards that person, right? Because you understand and feel their complexity. Most top-level managers know that lower-level employees do not understand the stresses they go through. And employees feel managers do not understand the stresses employees go through. Although most managers have been employees before, so in reality they do. Which is why a manager is obviously, above an employee, even though a lot of times you might see a really great graphic designer and then you see a manager who's not as good at graphic design above that person. And you, as somebody who's not experienced, could ask a question like, why is this amazing graphic designer under this manager who's not as good at graphic design? The truth is, the manager understands how to manage complex situations, right? And maybe manages multiple different graphic designers and their interaction with each other and knows just enough graphic design in order to be able to manage them. So, question is, can empathy be taught? And here's another research paper. You can, it's linked. You can go read it. The best managers use something called pseudo-empathy because the strategy works best and maintains healthy relationships. Practicing pseudo-empathy eventually leads to real empathy since it's actually a strategy that works. So pseudo-empathy is simple. It doesn't matter whether you're faking being empathetic. So you can actually say, let's just take the benefit of doubt. This person says they're sick, their dog died or whatever, and that person is feeling bad. Let's be pseudo-empathetic. Let's give the person benefit of doubt. Let's assume we were going through that situation. How would I feel if I was sick or my dog died? The brain believes the actions you take. You will eventually realize empathy is not just good for the world, but also the best management strategy if you want happy talent. So what I've seen is that when I have taken the benefit of doubt and given somebody the ability to, take an extra holiday or, understood their situation and said, yes, I totally get your situation, even though I'm suffering because of a productivity loss, I often find that those people come to me 3, 4, 5 years later and say, Varun, what you did for me on that day was amazing. Right? And I still remember and respect that. And, they bring me a new deal. And that's the way I've built relationships, right? So managers are often least empathetic under tremendous stress, right? So the times where I've been extremely stressed, I've been the least empathetic, right? So it's hard to feel for others when you're going through something. The best ways towards empathy are to maintain high emotional self-regulation and be pseudo-empathetic, which is fake being empathetic in situations where you don't have full information, which is, it's very hard for you to be fully empathetic about somebody who comes and says, oh, I'm sick today again, right? But imagine you being in their situation, even though you don't have full information, you don't know if they're really sick, right? But if you were sitting next to them, you'd have a better idea. So try to get full information. And in a situation where you don't have full information, just give the other person benefit of doubt. But if you're being taken advantage of, know where to draw the line. And usually for me, this is like a 3-strike thing, right? It's 1 strike where I give the other person benefit of the doubt. 2nd strike where I say, it's fine and I'm, still pleasant. 3rd strike where I say, look, even though I don't have full information about the situation that you've been in or that you're in, I am going to tell you that I'm okay with being empathetic, but this is the last time I can be empathetic, right? And then usually, the person comes in line, or if the person, then it's a case-by-case basis. So the 4th time is always a case-by-case basis. But what I try to do is get more information about that person. All right. So that's it for this video. We've learned just the very basics of empathy so that we understand where it's coming from. It's in your DNA. And we also understood how can managers be a little more empathetic, and a good way to train empathy is to fake being empathy in the beginning until it becomes natural to you. In fact, I would say when I was 16 or 17, I would get into a lot of arguments because I thought the other person was lying. And I realized at the end of the day, whether they're lying or not is not as important as being empathetic towards the situation, right? Understanding the underlying current in a situation, somebody can say something, but it could be because of something else. I once had a co-founder who told me, we were sitting in a room. I came up with an idea. He came up with an idea too. I said, that's not a very great idea. Let's not do that. And he felt really bad about it. And then, the entire next 2 months, it was like a cold war because every new thing that I came up with or every new feature or whatever we came up with, he would say, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. He became an extremely negative person. And once there was an argument about what color a button should be. And I said, let's make it green. And he said, no, let's make it red. Right? So we had this argument and he was really adamant on this. And I came in and I said, we had a big discussion. And then I realized that the real problem is not about the color of the button. The real problem is what I said to this person and how I treated this person's ideas a few months ago. Right? So you have to first learn to figure out what the underlying current is. Why is somebody really upset at something? Is it what they're saying or how they're feeling? And try to put yourself in their situation. What is being said is often not the truth. But what is being felt is often really being felt. The emotion is the same, whatever the person is saying. So try to use the emotion as a train, but stop at the right stop. Try to figure out what was the real reason. right? So it's a backward strain. If somebody's fighting with you right now, is angry with you, write that train of anger, see where it comes from, right? See where it stems from, and then try to apply empathy in that situation. So that's it for this episode. Catch you on the next.